Captain Kidd. Captain Kidd was once a respected privateer before ending his life on the gallows as a convicted pirate. William Kidd had sailed under official commission, hunting enemy vessels on behalf of the English crown. But after seizing ships under disputed circumstances, he was accused of piracy and murder. Political pressure mounted, and he was arrested, transported to England, and put on trial in London. Despite insisting he had acted legally, he was found guilty. On May 23, 1701, Kidd was taken to execution dock along the River Thames, the traditional site for hanging pirates. A large crowd gathered to witness his death. According to accounts, Kidd had been drinking heavily before the execution and appeared unsteady as he climbed the scaffold. The noose was placed around his neck and the trap was released, but instead of dying, Kidd fell when the rope snapped, crashing below the gallows still alive. Some in the crowd saw it as a sign he should be spared. Authorities disagreed. He was brought back up, secured with a second rope, and hanged again. This time the rope held, and Captain Kidd died at age 56. His body was then tarred to slow decomposition and placed inside an iron gibbet cage. It was hung near the Thames for years, visible to ships entering London, serving as a warning to sailors who might consider turning to piracy. Bartholomew Roberts. Bartholomew Roberts was the most successful pirate of the Golden Age, and unlike many others, he died in battle rather than on a scaffold. By early 1722, Roberts had captured hundreds of vessels across the Atlantic. He was known for strict discipline, elaborate clothing, and a preference for order over drunken chaos. On February 10, 1722, he was commanding his flagship Royal Fortune off the coast of West Africa when the British warship HMS Swallow appeared on the horizon. Despite facing a Royal Navy vessel, Roberts chose to engage rather than flee. His crew had celebrated the night before, and many were not in peak condition. As the ships maneuvered into position, HMS Swallow fired a broadside loaded with grape shot, clusters of iron balls designed to tear through men at close range. One blast struck Roberts directly, ripping through his throat. He collapsed instantly on the deck, killed almost immediately. He was 40 years old. Roberts had previously made his wishes clear. He did not want his body captured and displayed. His crew acted quickly, wrapping his corpse in chains to weigh it down before throwing him overboard into the Atlantic. His body was never recovered. With their captain dead, the remaining pirates were overwhelmed and captured. Many were later executed, but Roberts avoided the fate of public display. He disappeared into the sea, leaving behind a legend built on scale, discipline, and one final fatal decision to fight. Black Sam Bellamy. Black Sam Bellamy was often described as the Robin Hood of pirates, but his career ended not at the hands of the Navy, but in a storm. Bellamy rose quickly through pirate ranks in the early 18th century and captured the Whydah galley, a heavily armed slave ship he converted into his flagship. Unlike some pirates, Bellamy reportedly favored more democratic rules aboard his ship and cultivated loyalty among his crew. On April 26, 1717, the Whydah sailed near Cape Cod when it encountered a violent nor'easter. The storm intensified, rapidly driving the ship toward the Massachusetts coast. In darkness and heavy seas, the Whydah ran aground on a sandbar. The ship broke apart in the surf. Of the more than 100 crew members aboard, only 2 survived. Bellamy drowned along with the rest of his men. He was around 28 years old. For centuries, his exact resting place remained unknown. In 1984, the wreck of the Whydah was discovered off Cape Cod, confirming the details of the disaster. But Bellamy himself was never definitively identified. Unlike many pirates who died publicly on the gallows, Black Sam Bellamy's life ended in the chaos of a storm, his ship swallowed by the sea before any execution could take place. Edward Lowe. Edward Lowe was one of the most brutal pirates of the Golden Age. Operating in the early 1720s, Lowe built a reputation for extreme violence against captured crews. Contemporary accounts describe acts of torture and mutilation that shocked even other pirates. His own men eventually grew uneasy with his volatility. In 1724, Lowe's career began unraveling. After a series of pursuits by British forces in the Caribbean and Atlantic, his crew mutinied and abandoned him, along with a handful of loyal followers. From that point, his fate becomes uncertain. Some reports claim he was later captured by French authorities in Martinique and executed by hanging. Other accounts suggest he died quietly in Brazil or was lost at sea. There is no fully verified record of his final moments. What is certain is that Lowe disappeared from piracy after 1724. Unlike many of his contemporaries, there is no confirmed execution date, no displayed body, and no marked grave. His violent reputation survived him, even if the details of his death remain unclear. Calico Jack. Calico Jack was a pirate remembered as much for the company he kept as for his own exploits. John Rackham earned the nickname Calico Jack for his colorful clothing and commanded a small crew in the Caribbean. Among them were Bonny and Mary Red, two women who fought openly as pirates. In October 1720, a Jamaican sloop surprised Rackham's ship near Jamaica. Most of his crew, including Rackham, were reportedly drunk below deck when the attack came. Only a few, including Bonny and Red, resisted. The pirates were captured and taken to Jamaica for trial. The proceedings were swift, and Rackham was sentenced to death. On November 18, 1720, he was led to the gallows at Port Royal. Witnesses gathered to watch the execution. The noose was placed around his neck, and the trap was released. Calico Jack died by hanging at age 38. Authorities later displayed his body in a gibbet near the harbor entrance, leaving it exposed as a warning to sailors entering Jamaican waters. His death ended a short and relatively modest pirate career, but his association with Bonny and Mary Read ensured his name would not be forgotten. Mary Red. Mary Red lived much of her life disguised as a man, and her death came not at the gallows, but behind prison walls. Born in England, Red had passed as male from a young age, first as a soldier and later at sea. By the time she joined Calico Jack's crew, she was already experienced in combat. Witnesses later testified that during the attack that led to their capture, she fought harder than many of the men on board. After the crew was taken to Jamaica in October 1720, Red stood trial alongside the others. She was convicted and sentenced to hang. When the judge pronounced the sentence, both she and Bonny declared they were pregnant. Under English law, execution was postponed for pregnant women. Mary Red was transferred to Spanish Town Prison to await confirmation and childbirth. Conditions were harsh, with overcrowding, poor sanitation, and limited medical care. In early 1721, she developed a severe fever. Historical records suggest it may have been typhus or complications related to pregnancy. On April 28, 1721, Mary Red died in prison at around 26 years old. She was buried in an unmarked grave. Contemporary accounts frequently linked her closely with Bonny, and some later writers speculated that the two may have shared a romantic relationship, though definitive historical proof does not exist. Their partnership, however, became one of the most enduring stories of the pirate era. Bonny. Bonny was one of the few famous pirates whose death was never clearly recorded. Born in Ireland and raised in the American colonies, Bonny defied social expectations early in life. She left her husband, joined Calico Jack's crew, and openly fought as a pirate. During their capture in 1720, she was among the few who resisted. Like Mary Read, Bonny was convicted and sentenced to death. She also claimed pregnancy, which postponed her execution. After that point, the historical record becomes uncertain. There is no verified documentation of her execution. Some accounts suggest her wealthy father secured her release and brought her back to South Carolina. Others propose she remarried and lived quietly under another name. No confirmed burial record exists. Unlike many pirates whose deaths were public and violent, Bonny's fate remains unresolved. She disappears from the record after her imprisonment, leaving behind one of the rare mysteries in an era otherwise marked by public executions and displayed corpses. Henry Morgan. Henry Morgan was a pirate who avoided the gallows and ended his life not in chains, but as a colonial official. Morgan rose to prominence in the Caribbean during the 1660s and 1670s, leading large-scale raids against Spanish cities. His most famous attack was the sack of Panama in 1671, a brutal campaign that brought him immense wealth and notoriety. Although accused of piracy, Morgan operated at times under English sanction as a privateer. When political tensions shifted, he was arrested and sent to England. Instead of execution, he was eventually knighted by King Charles II and appointed lieutenant governor of Jamaica. From pirate captain to colonial authority, his career took an unusual turn. In his later years, Morgan struggled with health problems, likely related to heavy drinking and illness. On August 25, 1688, he died in Jamaica at around 53 years old. The official cause is believed to have been complications from liver disease or tuberculosis. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Morgan received a formal burial in Port Royal with military honors. Years later, an earthquake destroyed much of the city, and the location of his grave was lost beneath the sea. Henry Every. Henry Every was one of the most wanted pirates in the world, yet his death remains uncertain. In 1695, Every led the capture of the Ganj Isawai, a wealthy Mughal ship carrying enormous treasure, The raid triggered international outrage and became one of the largest pirate heists in history. The English government launched a global manhunt, offering substantial rewards for his capture. Unlike many pirates, every vanished before he could be caught. He and his crew scattered, and records of his movements become fragmented. Some reports claim he returned to England under an alias and lived in poverty. Others suggest he died abroad or at sea. There is no confirmed execution, no recorded grave, and no verified final sighting. What is widely accepted is that he never stood trial for piracy and was never publicly executed. Henry Every disappeared from history as suddenly as he had risen to infamy. In an era when most pirates ended their lives on the gallows or in battle, his final chapter remains one of the few unresolved mysteries of the Golden Age. Blackbeard. Blackbeard was one of the most feared pirates of the Golden Age, and his death came in open combat. On November 22, 1718, Edward Teach, known as Blackbeard, was anchored off Ocracoke Island, North Carolina. For years, he had terrorized ships across the Atlantic, using both violence and intimidation. He braided his beard and sometimes placed slow-burning fuses under his hat, creating a smoke-covered image meant to frighten opponents before battle. By late 1718, colonial authorities moved against him. Virginia's governor sent Lieutenant Robert Maynard of the Royal Navy to hunt him down. Maynard sailed with 2 small sloops, lightly armed but packed with sailors prepared for close combat. At dawn, Maynard entered the inlet. Blackbeard fired first, killing several men. In response, Maynard ordered most of his crew to hide below deck, making his ship appear nearly defeated. Blackbeard approached and led a boarding attack. As his men climbed aboard, Maynard's hidden sailors emerged, and a violent hand-to-hand fight broke out. Blackbeard and Maynard exchanged pistol shots at close range. Though wounded, Blackbeard kept fighting with his cutlass. As he raised his weapon again, a sailor struck him from behind. Surrounded and outnumbered, he was shot and slashed multiple times before collapsing on deck. He was 38 years old. Maynard had his head severed and hung from his ship as proof of the kill. Blackbeard's body was thrown into the water, and his head was later displayed at the harbor entrance as a warning to other pirates. And that brings us to the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like and help boost the video. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. See you soon. Bye.